Have you ever done a render but wanted a bit more control, like having access to the UV pass, or maybe the mist channel, or maybe something like diffuse direct, indirect, diffuse sideways, diffuse upside down? Well, you're not alone in this case, because it's a thing called render passes, and it's a very normal thing to do if you want to do some compositing after you've rendered out your Blender project. So for the example that I'm using here, I have some kind of, I don't know, I mean, I wouldn't want to find this in my bed. It's some kind of sea creature, or maybe not. If this thing's on land, then we got to move to the waters. But I have a basic project where I basically have this thing spinning, and we want access to these channels. And in the viewport, at least in the newer versions of Blender, in Cycles and in Eevee, you can actually look at these passes. So here's the combined pass, everything together. Again, this has no control, which is not what we want. We want access to, control. So stuff like ambient occlusion, we want to be able to see individually, diffuse direct, diffuse indirect, basically anything that you'd want access to. And again, question is, how do we render this? Well, the workflow is a bit tricky, but let me show you how to do it. So first step is you want to decide what passes it is you want. So you're going to go to view layer right here. So that's, 2 down from render tab. I don't know why I'm pretending like you can't count. Go here, and then in the passes, which is again exactly what you want, we can pick which passes we want. So for example, we already have combined in Z. I'm actually going to disable Z and enable mist pass. We can also do a normal pass, vector pass, UV pass. You can actually enable all of these. And again, if you don't know what one of these does, you can actually just look at what it does right here. So mist pass is kind of like a depth pass, but not really. It's kind of like a dumb depth pass is a good way to think about it. So I'm just going to enable 3 of these, and you can just keep going down here, especially if you have volumes and stuff like that, but we are not going to mess with it. So once you have enabled all your passes, you are going to see in the Compositing tab, a tab that I don't know if everybody opens, but we're opening it. You want to enable Use Nodes. You can see the render layers, in other words, what is being shown in this layout workspace. Again, so everything in this view layer, we can call it something like foreground, or actually killer shrimp. Don't know really. I know it's not a shrimp, but whatever. Killer shrimp, you can see in the killer shrimp render layer, we have the image. This is the combined pass. We have alpha, we have mist, normal, etc. And if we try to view any of these, of course, we're not going to see anything because we need to render this out. So we actually have some data. So my beefy PC is going to render out this nightmare. And then we can see the combined pass, alpha only, mist only, normal, vector, UV. How to actually do compositing with these, that's a different tutorial, but how to export them, that's what we're going to talk about. Now, we don't want to render these out one by one by one. That takes forever. We want a way to automate this. And in fact, there's a node for exactly that. It's called file output, which is a bit confusing because it only has one socket. Blender, don't know if I like the design of this, but you're going to see this has a dirty little secret. A secret it's keeping in a diary that might even make it into a... I should not go down this line of thinking. Let's continue. File output node, you want to go to item, properties, and you're going to see all these settings that are just tucked away that you might have not even known are there. So again, file output is all about, again, outputting files, but we can have multiple sockets. So first thing we want to do is just general export settings, as if we were doing this in the output tab. Basically, all of this is rendered mute. So it doesn't matter if this is set to JPEG or whatever, as long as this is set to PNG or whatever you want. This is going to be muted. This is what we care about. For the base path, we are just going to set an output directory. So I'm just going to make a folder. I'm going to call it Killer Shrimp. And this is where we want to render to. So I'm going to click accept. So all the passes are going to be rendered into this folder. And all of these passes, in this case, I guess we could pick whatever we want as long as it's not a video, are going to be PNG at 16-bit with 0 compression. By the way, if you want all the layers stacked into one file format without rendering out a bunch of PNGs, multi-layer OpenEXR is the way to do that. And you see a lot of these settings disappear, but that is its own video because you need to know how to work with EXR. So we're just going to render a bunch of PNG sequences. Next, we are going to define our output. So the first one is going to be combined. So that's going to rename the socket. We can add in another socket. So you can see this is where we're getting more control. This could be something like, I guess we don't really need an alpha channel. And again, if we don't want alpha, well, I guess alpha just comes packed with it. There must be a way to disable it somewhere. But either way, alpha isn't too important, even though it's inherent to basically all of these nodes, because again, we have PNG. But if you wanted, you could do alpha. Next one I'm going to do is mist. So I'm going to connect to mist here. And I wish there was a faster way to do this. So combine to combined, mist to mist. And let's add 1 or 2 more just so we get the point. Let's also render out our UV pass, which is useful if you want to retexture this thing later on in compositing, which is a horrible idea. And then let's also do a diffuse indirect. And you can just keep adding sockets, you get the point. But I'm only going to do a couple of these. Well, Once you have all of these sockets, again, make sure your base path is determined. Basically, everything is going to be rendered into this folder as a PNG with these naming conventions. So it's either going to be called combine, miss, UV, or diffuse indirect. So that's what these file subpaths are. And we're going to use the node format so everything kind of works together and is copied from a single version of this, right? We don't want one of these to be PNGs and one of these to be XRs and stuff like that, okay? So once you have all of these connected to the file output, and again, something to composite so it actually renders, I think this part's important. Now we can hit F12 to render, and let's see what happens. So with no extra cost, I don't think, it's going to render at pretty much the exact same time, which is the beauty of multipass. Since it's already doing these calculations for diffuse indirect and all that, you're literally just gaining, right? You don't lose any render time, or rather, you don't gain render time. It takes the same amount of time, but now we have actually exported every individual step. So you can see we have combined one, diffuse indirect one, whatever this is, missed one, stuff like this. You have control to all of these passes. I'm just going to delete these. And again, this works with rendering and animation. So if I do Control F12, and I'm going to render at lower sample count just so it renders a bit faster, we'll render a couple samples. You can see, if I go to the Killer Shrimp folder, you can see every single frame that it renders, it's going to add onto this, and because of the naming conventions, they're all going to be packed together. So combined with combined, diffuse indirect with indirect, and you can import these image sequences into any program for compositing, including Blender, and then do your compositing there. Works with DaVinci Resolve, Premiere, stuff like this. So again, the point of this is multipass is already being calculated for, but Blender just smashes it together into a combined pass. So why even do that, right? Why not just save all these individual layers so we can then tweak them later, do color correction on any of these passes, add a bit of a depth of field fakery and stuff like that. But in a future video, I might talk about OpenEXR multi-layer, which again has all of these passes, but now it's only in a single file, and then you need some compositing tricks to actually dissect this multi-layer. But anyways, that's the tutorial for passes. You can now export any pass that your heart desires. I mean, I guess this doesn't even talk about shader AOVs. We'll talk about that eventually. But yeah, so hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, that's a good thing. But also, I just want to mention at the end of these tutorials, Patreon exists. That is where I upload blend files like this one. A reason I can upload this one, this is a CCO model, so I can just package this in there. You can get this, but what am I talking about? You can get this blend file just so you can experiment with rendering out passes, stuff like that, and also any other blend file I've ever uploaded. Patreons get access to that immediately. Exclusive tutorials, usually those are tutorial series that are not on the CG Matter or Default Cube channels. Additionally, behind the scenes content, early access when I upload videos early, Discord, stuff like that. So Patreon exists. I want to say thank you to all 560 to 70 some active patrons. You guys are the real MVPs keeping both channels running. And for people who are interested, feel free to hop on board. For the people who aren't, feel free to not hop on board. I'm still going to make free tutorials because that's the thing I do. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this little thing. It's useful. Maybe not the most exciting thing. It's not tracking. It's not, making your arm robotic and then you like jack off with it. Okay, it's not that. It's just multipass. But yeah, that's it. See ya.